Hey everybody, how's it going today? My light is a little bit weird. I feel a little bit bright on one side. Apparently my window is reflecting into my face. Um, so, how's it going? Any exciting stories? Anything fun to tell me? I feel like I might need to move my camera because I don't like my face looking that white. Better? Better? You can see my comfy blanket. I'm a little bit chilly today, so, it's really weird. It's like a halo over my head. I don't know. Whatever. My face just doesn't look as white and weird anymore, so we'll just go with it. So if you remember, what happened last time? Kendra, Dugan, Gavin, Warren, they're all at Lost Mesa, and they got in to the start of it. And remember, they got attacked by these creatures, and now Kendra has a souvenir. It's like this weather stick that if she shakes it, it makes storms go all crazy and kooky and everything like that. So now they're in another chamber, another part of the way to the artifact. Okay? So Warren halted and motioned for the others to do likewise. Choke pods? Dugan asked. You won't believe how many, Warren said. Come forward slowly. Don't fully emerge from the cover of the passageway. The others crept forward until they all had a view of the congested cavern. Thousands of bulbs floated in the air. Mottled with shades of cinnamon, brown, and black, they were mostly spherical, though the tops looked a bit pinched. Their texture was fibrous like corn husks. The smallest were the size of softballs, the largest more like beach balls. All remained in constant motion, drifting lazily until they floated close together, in which case they gently repelled one another. What are they? Kendra asked. If you touch them, they burst, releasing a highly toxic gas, Dugan explained. The gas can get into your system through respiration or even just contact with your skin. You'll die almost instantly, and the toxin will gradually liquefy you. Eventually, your remains will vaporize into fumes that can be absorbed by other choke pods. This sounds like a fantastic thing to do. I think that they're in a good place right now, right? Nothing to worry about. If one of us touches even a small choke pod, everyone in the cavern will perish and it will be unsafe to enter for hours, Warren said. Kendra tried to imagine weaving across the room. The choke pods floated from a foot or two above the floor to up near the ceiling, never quite brushing up against the walls. There was space between them, but not much, and the constant drifting meant the gaps big enough to accommodate a person were constantly opening and closing. Where are we trying to go? Kendra asked. There are several false passageways around the perimeter of the room, Dugan said, but the true way forward is through a hole in the center of the room. Kendra saw a raised area in the center of the cavern. Surrounded by rocks, the hole was not visible. It was a good hiding place for a passage, especially since the choke pods were most densely gathered in the middle of the room. Tammy explained that the key is to stay low, Warren related. The choke pods never strike the ground, nor the ceiling, nor the walls, nor the stalagmites, not the stalactites, nor each other. She said the choke pods rarely dip low enough to touch a person lying flat on the floor of the cavern. So, we'll squirm forward, staying near stalagmites wherever possible. Can you manage this, Neil? Dugan asked. Neil nodded stoically. I'll try first, Warren said. You all back away into the corridor. I'll cry out a warning if I brush up against a choke pod and pollute the cavern. If I do, fall back to the chasm and wait. Otherwise, I'll call out once I'm safely in the hole. The others retreated deeper into the narrow passageway, fending off the darkness with 2 flashlights. You'll go next, Kendra, Dugan informed her. Shouldn't Gavin go next? Kendra suggested. If all else fails, he and Warren could go on ahead and retrieve the artifact. Then Then you, Dugan, so you can help them, then me and Neil. Makes sense, Neil agreed. Except I'm the biggest and therefore most likely to touch Chokepod, even lying prone, Dugan said. Gavin next, then Kendra, then me, then Neil. They waited in silence. From behind, Kendra heard a distant roar, faint as the last rebound of an echo. Did you hear that? Kendra whispered to Gavin. Yeah, he whispered back, squeezing her hand consolingly. Even in a dark cave surrounded by the likelihood of death, Kendra could not help wondering if maybe there were romantic overtones to the gesture. She left her hand in his, enjoying the contact, thinking of the contrast between his stuttering speech and the confidence with which he had protected her on the mesa. I'm clear, Warren finally hollered. Yes. Guess I'm up, Gavin said. I'll take the staff, Kendra, and the spear, Neil. It might trip you up in there. See you guys on the other side. Handing Kendra her flashlight, he raised his voice. Warren, can you light the way for me? Sure, Warren replied. He slipped out of sight down the passageway. It seemed much less time had elapsed than Warren had taken before Gavin called out, Kendra's turn. Mouth dry, palms wet, Kendra crept forward. Where the passageway ended, she stared into the cavern, watching chokepods dreamily rise and fall and drift laterally in every possible combination. She could see Warren's head in the center of the room. He held a flashlight. Kendra, Warren said, I'll be your spotter. Just squirm on your belly and follow the beam of my flashlight. Let me tell you how to move. I have the advantage of being able to see your whole body all at once, along with all of the choke pods near you. It worked well with Gavin. But if I pop a pod, you'll die with me, she said. If you burst a choke pod and the gas doesn't get me, your grandfather will. Come on. Kendra prostrated herself and wormed forward. The floor of the cavern was neither smooth nor particularly jagged. She slithered along slowly, using her knees and elbows and wiggling her waist, grateful to have Warren's flashlight beam to follow. She kept her eyes down, hardly aware of the bulbs bobbing above her like grotesque balloons. She was more than halfway to the center of the cavern when she heard a sharp intake of breath from Warren. Lie flat, Kendra, flat as you can. She laid her cheek against the stone, exhaling the air from her lungs, willing herself to sink into the rock. On my command, roll onto your back to your left. Think about which way is left for you. Don't roll right. Ready? Almost, now. Kendra rolled to her left onto her back, keeping her body as close to the ground as possible. Although she wanted to close her eyes, she could not help looking. Choke pods crowded all around her. Can you imagine how freaky that would be? They're all crowding around her. Oh my gosh. She watched a huge pod dip low beside her, inches from the cavern floor, precisely where she had been, before bobbing up just high enough to clear her waist. Keep still, Warren ordered, voice taut. Although the huge choke pod did not touch any of the others, its passage stirred the surrounding pods in new directions. A pair of choke pods the size of basketballs nearly collided directly above Kendra's nose, so close to her face that she expected both of them to brush against her skin and rupture. Instead, they drifted apart, missing her by a fraction of an inch. Trembling, Kendra slowly inhaled, watching the cluster of choke pods above her leisurely disperse. Yes. A tear leaked from the corner of one eye. Well done, Kendra, Warren said, sounding relieved. Roll to your left again and keep following the beam of my flashlight. Now? Kendra asked. Sure. She rolled over and inched forward, trying to calm her breathing. Scramble forward quickly, Warren instructed. You've reached a clear area. Her elbows ached as she propelled herself rapidly across the cavern floor. The flashlight beam guided her right, then left. Slow down, Warren said. Wait, stop, back up a little. Kendra glanced up and saw a choke pod the size of a volleyball falling toward her head at a diagonal. It was definitely on a collision course. Don't roll, Warren warned. They're on both sides. Blow at it. Puckering her lips, Kendra emptied her lungs at the oncoming choke pod. The stream of her breath sent the dappled bulb veering off course. Lie flat, Warren commanded. This time she did close her eyes, waiting in the darkness for a choke pod to kiss her skin and burst. Okay, Warren said. Almost there, Kendra. Squirm forward. She opened her eyes and followed the beam to the rocky barrier at the edge of the hole. Warren was so close. He had her wait. and then scuttle over the rocks when the air was momentarily clear. Then he was helping her take hold of iron rungs bolted into the stone wall of the hole. Surprised to be alive, quivering in shock, she descended the rungs to where Gavin stood waiting. "Sounded like you had some close calls," Gavin said. "I hated it," Kendra admitted. "I thought I was a goner. I had to blow one away." I blew 3, Gavin said. "I got cocky and tried to hurry. Almost cost me." "Maybe you should sit down," he said. Kendra plopped down with her back to the wall and drew her knees up to her chest. She still could not believe she had survived. A couple of times, the choke pods had come unbearably close. She bowed her head, striving to steady herself. The adventure was not over yet. Before she knew it, Dugan had descended the rungs and stood beside Gavin. "Could have gone my whole life without that experience." He sounded shaken. "I've been in some tight spots, but death has never felt so near." Kendra felt relieved that she was not the only person who had found the experience of scooting across the cavern floor traumatizing. "Isn't the dragon our next problem?" Gavin asked. "According to Tammy," Dugan affirmed, "she's been right this far." That was when they heard an explosion, followed by Neil's strangled voice crying, "Run." An instant later, Warren slapped to the ground at the base of the ladder. "Go, go, go," he urged, yanking Kendra to her feet. They charged recklessly down the uneven passageway, rounding several corners before they slowed. "Are you all right?" Dugan asked Warren, placing an arm around his shoulders. "I think so," Warren said. "I saw it coming. Too many choke pods converging on Neil. I warned him, then started down just in case, leaving the flashlight propped up on the rocks by the top of the hole. When I heard the choke pod burst, I dropped, and somehow landed without spraining my ankle. I think we're clear." Turning, he punched the wall of the cave hard enough to make his knuckles bleed. You did well," Gavin told Warren. "If not for you, I wouldn't have made it through the cavern." "Me neither," Kendra said. "We owe you," Dugan agreed. Warren nodded, shrugging gently away from Dugan. "I owed Neil. He saved my skin. Dangerous place. Bad luck. We should keep moving." The others followed Warren as the cave began sloping up for the first time. Kendra tried not to think of Neil lying inert in the cavernous room full of bizarre floating bulbs. She understood what Warren meant about owing him. If not for Neil, she would be dead as well. And now Neil had lost his life. Gavin shouldered past Kendra and Dugan, grabbing Warren. "Wait," he said in an urgent whisper. "What is it?" Warren asked. "I smell dragon," Gavin responded. "Time for me to earn my keep. If I can secure a safe passage, I'll whistle. When you enter the room, don't look at the dragon, especially not into her eyes." "Her eyes?" Dugan asked. "Smells female," Gavin said. "No matter what happens, don't even consider attacking her. If things go wrong, run." Warren moved aside. Gavin walked past him and around a corner. Warren, Dugan, and Kendra waited silently. They did not wait long. An ear-splitting screech rent the air, prompting all 3 of them to clamp their hands over their ears. A succession of roars and shrieks followed, seemingly too powerful to proceed from any animal. The only creature Kendra had ever heard make sounds at that volume was Bahamut, which was not a cheery thought. The deafening bellows persisted, making the stone vibrate underfoot. To Kendra, the tumult sounded like 100 dragons rather than one. Finally, the clamor subsided, the silence now seeming much quieter than it had before. They uncovered their ears. A moment later, they heard a high, shrill whistle. "That's the signal," Dugan said. "Me first. Warren, hang back with Kendra." Dugan took the lead while Warren and Kendra trailed at a distance. Soon they saw light up ahead. Dugan switched off his flashlight. They reached the opening of a chamber so vast that Kendra had trouble envisioning how it could fit inside the mesa. The tremendous room reminded her of when Hal had described caverns large enough to contain an entire football stadium. She had assumed he was exaggerating. Apparently not. The colossal chamber was lit by glowing white stones set in the walls, making Kendra recall the stones inside the inverted tower. The high roof was so far away. Kendra doubted whether even Hugo could throw a rock high enough to reach it. She and Warren watched Dugan, who proceeded farther into the room, surveyed the scene, then waved them forward. The room was wider and longer than it was tall. Some stalagmites rose over 40 feet into the air. Although she knew she was not supposed to look, Kendra could not help shifting her gaze to Gavin, who stood 50 yards away, his back to her, arms and feet spread wide, facing a dragon perched above him on an oblong boulder. They appeared to be locked in an intense staring contest, both holding perfectly still. The dragon gleamed like a new penny, overlapping copper scales encasing her in metallic armor. A tall fin ran from the top of her fierce head to the base of her neck. Not including the whip-like tail and the long arched neck, the body of the dragon was the size of an elephant. A pair of shiny wings were folded at her sides. The eyes of the dragon shifted to Kendra. They were bright like molten gold. The dragon's mouth cracked open in a fang-filled imitation of a smile. "You dare to meet my gaze, little one?" the dragon asked, her silky words ringing like struck metal. Kendra didn't know what to do. She felt foolish for disobeying her instructions. She had been concerned about Gavin, and then the dragon had looked so fascinating. The heat of the stare made her feel cold. Her limbs went numb. What was it Warren had said about dragon tamers? Most people froze when dragons spoke to them. Dragon tamers spoke back. "You are very beautiful," Kendra said in the loudest voice she could manage. "My eyes could not resist." "This one is most eloquent," the dragon mused, keeping her eyes locked on Kendra. "Come closer, my pet." "Kendra, look away," Gavin demanded. "Shaliz, do not forget our arrangement." Kendra tried to turn her head, but the muscles in her neck would not respond. She tried to close her eyes, but her eyelids refused to operate. Although she felt immobilized by her fear, her mind remained clear. "Your companions were not to gaze upon me," Shaliz sang, bright eyes still skewering Kendra. The dragon moved for the first time, crouching lower as if coiling to spring. "Do not forget yourself, worm," Gavin yelled. The dragon looked back at him, eyes narrowed. "Worm, is it?" Kendra dropped her gaze to the floor. Warren appeared at one elbow, Dugan at the other, hurrying her along. She shuffled forward, listening to the conversation without raising her eyes. "She spoke to you politely, Shaliz," Gavin said. "Your kind are not meant to devour such without cause." "She broke your promise and laid eyes on me. What further cause should I require?" The words were harsh as swords clashing. Gavin began speaking an unintelligible language, as distinct from a human tongue as the squeals of dolphins or the moans of whales. The dragon replied in similar fashion. The volume of the conversation was louder than when they had used English. Kendra felt an impulse to look back. Was the dragon still influencing her, or was she simply insane? Resisting the urge, she kept her eyes averted from Gavin and Shaliz. Presently, Kendra, Warren, and Dugan reached the base of a long, wide stairway. As they climbed, the argument ended. Kendra could imagine Gavin staring down the dragon again. How had he gotten away with insulting her? How was he able to converse in her own language, a language that evidently not even the fairies knew, since Kendra had not understood any part of the exchange? There was certainly more to Gavin than met the eye. Legs burning, they arrived at the top of the stairwell and beheld a deeply recessed alcove with an iron door. Advancing to the door, they found it locked, with no key in sight. They waited, none of them daring to look back. Finally, they heard rapid footfalls on the stairs. Gavin approached from behind, plunged a golden key into the lock, and opened the door. "Hurry," he said. They rushed through the door into a corridor walled with stone blocks. Gavin paused to close the door behind them and then hurried to catch up. The floor was tiled. Glowing stones shone from sockets in the walls. "You spoke like a dragon," Dugan said in wonder. "Starting to see why Dad kept me a secret?" Gavin asked. Dugan remained amazed. "I understood you were a dragon tamer, a natural, but this... If you care for me at all, please never share what you heard," he said. "I'm sorry I looked at the dragon," Kendra said. Don't mention it," Gavin said. "How did you manage to reply?" he asked. "I don't know," Kendra said. "My body couldn't move, but my mind stayed clear. I remembered that dragon tamers spoke to dragons, so after I got caught in her stare, I gave it a try. Every other part of me was frozen, but my mouth still worked." "Usually the mind is paralyzed along with the body," Gavin said. You have serious potential as a dragon tamer, he said. How were you able to look in her eyes? Warren asked. I've always understood that dragon tamers avoid eye contact. You were peeking as well? Gavin accused. Just enough to see you, he said. I challenged Shalise to try to break my will without touching me, Gavin said. Our arrangement was that if she failed, she would let us pass in and out freely. What made you think you could succeed? Dugan exclaimed. I've always been immune to the charms of dragons, Gavin said. Through some inborn quirk, their stares do not mesmerize me. She could have decapitated me with a flick of her tail, but she is young and has lived in solitude, so she relished the challenge. Surely, to her, it seemed a contest she would not possibly lose. From what I half glimpsed, she did look rather small, Warren said. Very mysterious, Gavin said. Shalise is a youngling, with most of her growth ahead of her. She can't be much more than 100 years old, yet this vault has been here at least 10 times that long. The cavern where she dwells was raked with claw marks and gouges from a much larger, older dragon. I noticed, Warren said, so where was the parent? I inquired how she came here, Gavin said. She refused to respond. Something about the whole situation seems shady. At least she surrendered her key as promised. Her youth explains why she attacked the others so quickly, Dugan said. Right, Gavin agreed. Normally dragons prefer to toy with their food. The young ones are more impulsive. Are all dragons as metallic as she is? Kendra asked. She almost looked like a robot. Each dragon is unique, Gavin said. I have seen others with metal scales, but Shalise was the most metallic I've seen. Her entire body is sheathed in a copper alloy. You can even hear it in her voice. Dugan laid an arm across Gavin's shoulders. I suppose it goes without saying, but well done back there. You're a marvel. Thanks, Gavin said, lowering his eyes shyly. As they proceeded down the corridor, Warren led the way, probing the ground with his broken spear. He warned them not to touch the walls and to keep an eye out for tripwires. Now that they had passed beyond the limits of where Tammy had scouted, any danger was possible. And that's where I'm going to stop for today. Yeah, I know. I can hear you saying, no, keep reading, but I can't hear you. I'm just kidding, you guys. I miss you tons, and I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you next time. Bye.